bodies swinging in the southern breeze.
All I want is equality for my sister, my brother, my people, and me.
Cops give a damn about a Negro. Pull a trigger, kill him, he's a hero.
The land where the lump are consumed by consumption.
This isn't for the upper class, it's for everyone that lives in debt.
When we celebrate going to jail, we are literally celebrating enslavement.
The FBI killed Martin Luther King.
American dream only makes sense if you're sleeping.
That's it!
Governments across the globe and throughout time have always known that art is dangerous. Nothing speaks to me more of the efficacy of revolutionary creativity than its continuous censorship and weaponization by the powers that be. Throughout history, revolutionary creatives like the poets Nazim Hikmet, Yanis Ritsos, Irina Ratushinskaya have been persecuted, killed, interned in concentration camps, labeled dangerous state criminals, exiled, placed under house arrest, had their work burned and banned because political powers knew that these creations were dangerous. Even today, the censorship of revolutionary creatives is still occurring. The Moroccan rapper known as El Haked, or The Enraged, has been imprisoned 3 times since his rise to fame during the 2011 Arab Spring movement for his outright criticism of King Mohammed VI. He became a target of the government when his hit song Baraka Minescata, or Stop the Silence, roused people to take to the streets in defiance of the state's monopoly on major industries. In 2011, the politically outspoken and artistically subversive Chinese artist Ai Weiwei was arrested on allegations of economic crimes, fined over $2 million in alleged unpaid taxes and fines, eventually had his name erased from the list of the Chinese Contemporary Art Awards past winners and jury members. And his famous installation, Sunflower Seeds, which represents the downtrodden Chinese populace, was pulled from its 15th anniversary exhibition. The US is notorious for its systemic harassment and censorship of artists. The public availability of COINTELPRO documents have revealed that the FBI, CIA, and police have long been monitoring black musicians, keeping enormous files on everyone from Nat King Cole and Duke Ellington to Chance the Rapper and Tupac Shakur, categorizing them as black extremists and subjecting them to all manner of state-sanctioned harassment, censorship, imprisonment, and violence. Music labels and corporations in the UK and US are also complicit, refusing to give airtime or to sign any artists whose political messaging is deemed to be too subversive.
We use the analysis of my brethren Lowkey. I know he sold thousands and thousands and thousands of albums with no radio, no TV, just off YouTube. Labels should be beating down his door if they want to make money, right? But his political message is just never going to be played on the radio. They tell us it's not marketable. What they mean is, again, it doesn't fit with the agenda of the people who control the music industry. That's not about conspiracy. What would be the consequence if the song Terrorist, for example, was that popular just off a YouTube video? What would be the consequence if it was played daytime on Radio 1? Do you think people would just suddenly not like the song and not listen to it? But what he's saying is unacceptable to be played at that time of day to that audience, not because it wouldn't resonate with them, actually quite the contrary, because if it resonates with them, what are the consequences of that? And what are the consequences of making someone like Kareem Dennis, aka Lowkey, a national superstar in a country like this? He's not harmless, he's got something to say. What are the effects on people's consciousness of making someone like that a pop star? This is not unique or new. A lot of people say, hey, it's conspiracy. No, throughout the ages, even in the Bible, they talk about singers and players of instruments, and their interaction with power. If we go from ancient Egypt to the griots of West Africa to the poetry of the Islamic world, the interaction between musicians and entertainers and power has always been there. If we talk about the classical world, where certain phrases were banned because they were considered devilish and demonic or associated with infidels, with the Moors, etc. You know, so this interaction between music's spiritual and esoteric and human power and the power of the state and the church and all these other stakeholders in society has always been there. This is just a modern manifestation of it.
The US is known to apply these strategies worldwide, such as in 2014 when it was revealed that the United States Agency for International Development had spent 2 years trying to infiltrate the music scene in Cuba in order to use rappers and musicians to subvert the Cuban state through the power of hip-hop. When Trump came into power as president, he sought to eliminate the National Endowment of the Arts. Hitler chose which art could be included and elevated in art exhibitions in Munich and which would be considered degenerate. Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet carried out such a reign of terror upon artists that they had to flee the country. The list goes on and on. If governments and dictators see art as such a threat that they would go to the lengths of deporting, imprisoning, and executing artists over it, how the hell has art gotten a reputation in certain segments of the left as being a self-indulgent, bougie, and useless activity? The short answer is, of course, capitalism and what Bell Hooks refers to as the white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. But the long answer is a little bit more multifaceted. One major issue is the whitewashing of art as a white, middle-class, educated activity of luxury and leisure. But this completely erases the radical nature of art and how much art comes from those who are disenfranchised. Whilst it's definitely true that it's easier to make your living as an artist if you're privileged, art as a personal and political expression comes from people all across the globe. Street art, for example, is a creative expression accessible to almost anyone, and anything but a luxury given that it's an illegal activity, which, for some, means risking police brutality or even death. Categorizing creativity as a bougie hobby of the elite erases the experiences of artists who have risked their lives in service of their art, and it also erases the massive population of BIPOC and/or impoverished artists who fight to bring their creations to life against enormous and even lethal obstacles.
Male model Michael Stewart died Wednesday in Bellevue Hospital 2 weeks after being arrested by transit police for allegedly painting graffiti on the East 14th Street subway station. 1 hour after his arrest, the officers brought Stewart, in a coma, to Bellevue Hospital for treatment. He remained there and in that coma until his death on Wednesday.
Another issue is the redefining of creativity as the domain of Silicon Valley tech bros. In our capitalistic state, creativity is often equated to innovation and is only valued by how much money it can generate for a tech company or how it can revolutionize or disrupt an industry to further exploit workers and increase profits. The irony is that many of these so-called creative solutions are ideas that were stolen from other people or were total scams, as in the case of Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. Additionally, we're inundated with a capitalist fixation on production, efficacy, logic, and action, where we want everything to have a tangible, measurable impact. If we can't immediately see the political function of a piece of art, then we deem it as a waste of time. Capitalism has also managed to become extremely proficient at cannibalizing movements, so when revolutionary subversive art does emerge, it has become co-opted, censored, exploited, and shut down, making it seem to some like a waste of time. There's also the dependence on social media for artists to make a living, requiring them to distill their art down to what will go viral or what will be algorithm friendly, meaning that a lot of the time they end up censoring themselves or diluting their original message in order to be able to successfully navigate these spaces. And as a result, a lot of the time the art is then superficial or vapid or inauthentic and without a purpose. But is art really a waste of time? I think not. On November 25th, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women in 2019, hundreds of protesters gathered in Chile's capital to perform the anti-rape anthem, Un violador en tu camino, or a rapist in your path. The song and its corresponding choreography quickly spread across social media and across the world, with similar protests popping up in Peru, Cuba, Spain, France, Mexico, Lebanon, India, Colombia, and many other countries. Even inspiring a demonstration in the Turkish parliament by women from the Republican People's Party. Countless remixes of the song were created using actual audio of the protesters over club beats. Young people drew inspiration from the lyrics to create social media posts telling their own sexual assault stories. A feminist manifesto, a war cry, had set the world on fire. The song was created by Chilean feminist theatre group Las Tesis in collaboration with Chilean activists to be a battle cry for people across the globe to express their anguish and rage at gender-based violence. The lyrics are damning and absolutely powerful, calling out the state and judges and police and government as responsible for rape and femicide. When the protesters hit a rhythmic crescendo with the lyrics, "And I am not guilty, not because of where I was or how I was dressed," lines they repeat over and over, crowds everywhere can't help but yell and cheer, swept up not just by the lyrics, but also by the musicality and force with which they are delivered. The protesters wear blindfolds as a nod to the widespread blinding of protesters at the Chilean protests against austerity that took place earlier that year and are still ongoing. The blindfolds serve as a reminder of state-sanctioned violence and also provide chilling, iconic imagery as the hundreds or even thousands of protesters all take on a look of being censored or being identityless, like so many women that have been kidnapped and killed, erased by patriarchal violence. The dance that the protesters perform is also deeply steeped with meaning. The initial swaying side to side is hypnotic and, combined with the blindfolds, creates a dizzying sense of unity and almost a haunting quality, as if all of the patriarchy's victims have come back to seek justice. The protesters point emphatically when yelling the line, "El violador eres tú," or "The rapist is you," indicting all of the accused systems and also the onlooker, the general public, those who uphold these crimes as justified or permissible. The squat that comes during lyrics about femicide and rape is the position that female protesters specifically are forced to do upon arrest, a reference to the documented widespread torture and sexual assault of female protesters by police during the Chilean protests. Every country and region that took up the anthem wove pieces of its own local issues and culture into the song, giving each performance a deeply historical and cultural significance. In Puerto Rico, for instance, protesters sang on top of popular Caribbean rhythms such as bomba, plena, and reggaeton, and performed a style of dance developed by young, black, low-income, queer artists called perreo combativo, or a combative form of reggaeton dance. This dance style is credited as being instrumental in getting Ricardo Rossello to resign as governor in July of that year after 2 weeks of protesting. Las Tesis, the feminist theatre group that created Un Violado en Tu Camino, is a collective that used performances to translate feminist theories into art to make it more accessible to the public. Un Violado en Tu Camino was inspired by the anthropologist Rita Segato, whose work argues that sexual violence is a political problem, not a moral one. Las Tesis found a way to take this powerful idea and then translate it into something that could become a great entry point for people to come on board with leftist or feminist ideas who may otherwise never have come across these ideas before, or who would find the usual dry theoretical approach a turn-off. Where attempts to rationally explain issues surrounding the patriarchy with facts, stats, and information alone have failed, this piece of art seemed to affect change by engaging people's hearts and senses, tapping into emotion and empathy rather than just the intellect. A piece of performance art heavily layered with political meaning and references that spoke directly to the experiences of hundreds of millions of people across the globe. The art inspired activists, which in turn inspired more artists and more activists, resulting in a global cry of no more. Un Violado en Tu Camino is just one example of the intersections between creativity and activism. There are countless more examples that I could give. Hip-hop artists' commentary on police brutality in the US inspired and exacerbated the 1992 riots and looting. Los Angeles gangster rap not only predicted the riots, but served as its soundtrack. NWA's Fuck the Police blasted from cars. Historian Robin Kelly wrote that the autobiography of Malcolm X convinced unknown numbers of kids that even second-rate gangsters can become political radicals. And of all the things to curb racism, promote civil rights, and be a symbol of anti-racism in the US in the 1960s, it was Harper Lee's novel To Kill a Mockingbird that transformed countless people's hearts and minds. There's a reason that the Black Panthers and Rojavan revolutionaries didn't just have a militant aspect to their revolution, but also very early on put out a call for creatives to contribute to their social movements, because they recognized the integral role that creativity plays in revolution. In all of this, it's clear that creativity is a powerful tool to spread social and political consciousness, to get people involved in revolutionary movements, and be the catalyst that sparks revolt. We're all currently trapped in the imaginations of our oppressors, crushed by the everyday grind of capitalism and the numbing nature of working to survive. It's very easy to forget that nations, borders, money, corporations, these are all imagined orders. They're fictions that we've all collectively been taught to believe in. The self too is an imaginary story. This story tells us who to love, who to discriminate against, and what we're supposed to do with our lives. As William Blake wrote, imagination is not a state, it is human existence itself. To liberate our imaginations, we need new stories to believe in. We need new visions of what could be. Otherwise, capitalist realism will continue to delude the masses into believing that there is no alternative to what is today.
All human beings who muster imagination and empathy to conceive of an alternative reality, given the nightmarish, catastrophic-driven realities most of us have to come to terms with.
Afrofuturism, for instance, is a broad term encompassing a wide range of artists and mediums through which Black futures are envisioned. It offers escapism for those in the African diaspora to see themselves in worlds where they are not oppressed, where they no longer have to struggle or frame themselves within white standards and white supremacy. Solar punk is another recent entry into the imagined futures genre as a literary and art movement that envisions how the future may look if we succeed in creating a balanced and just world to live in, with a specific focus on the environment and utilizing technology for good. Utopian fiction such as Kim Stanley Robinson's writing on the transition to utopia, or Jonathan Porritt's book, The World We Made, that gave us a blueprint of how to get the world back on track from the brink of collapse from now to 2050, can offer thought-provoking suggestions for the next steps we can take to avoid extinction. Creativity can be a powerful way for us to decolonize and expand our imaginations and find compelling visions for us to strive towards. Even though I've been talking about the importance of reclaiming radical creativity, I do want to make clear that I don't think that art has to be political or has to be revolutionary or has to do anything in particular in order for it to have value. Obviously, there's no such thing as being apolitical. Everything is political to some extent, and I'm not saying that absolutely any art is fine. There are plenty of harmful forms of art that I definitely disagree with, but what I am saying is that I think it's okay if art is fun, frivolous, meaningless, because holding art to a utilitarian standard echoes capitalism's fixation on quantifiable results, likes, shares, follows, how much money you make. And more importantly, I think creating things and bearing witness to other people's creations is so vital because it can awaken and enliven us to another way of being, another way of seeing the world outside of oppressive systems. Creativity can help us be alive and awake to the wonder and beauty of the world. To hear a song that stirs something inside of us, to see the absolute wonder of the Sistine Chapel, or to experience the communal solidarity of a group drumming session. You get the feeling that we live in a world of such abundance and beauty. Just being in the presence of such wonder can help to shine a light on the ridiculousness of our system. Like, we are all here on this earth for this brief amount of time to love, to laugh, to create, to play. Why are we forced to spend most of our existence working in jobs, following money, status, success in order to make profit for rich people? And to fall in love with the world can fill us with this deep desire to preserve this precious planet, to become guardians of the future so that generations to come can enjoy this wonder and this beauty. Creativity can also help us to become more attuned to our emotions. A film, a poem, a song coaxes out of us things that we don't usually allow ourselves to feel and helps us process things that we've been struggling with and can help us access neglected dimensions of ourselves. Making time to experience someone else's creations or listening to the creative call within ourselves usually requires us to slow down, become lost and absorbed in a state of flow and deep listening. It's a way to create space for stillness and for a different kind of human experience outside of constant fixation on productivity, busyness, and money-orientated activities. Why should we all use our creative power? Because there is nothing that makes people so generous, joyful, lively, bold, and compassionate, so indifferent to fighting and the accumulation of objects and money. The importance of making space for nourishing activities, even if they're not explicitly revolutionary, is echoed in the Industrial Workers of the World song Bread and Roses, which includes the powerful line, "Hearts starve as well as bodies." The point is not to reduce revolutionary struggle down to dry political change. It's also about making room for things like creativity that liberates our spirits. Even Karl Marx, often thought of as only concerned with economic transformation, seemed to believe that creativity was vital. He wrote in Wages of Labour, "To develop in greater spiritual freedom, a people must, above all, have time at their disposal for spiritual creative activity and spiritual enjoyment." And Che Guevara famously stated, "I'm not interested in dry economic socialism or fighting against mere misery, but we are also fighting against alienation. If we are not preoccupied with the repercussions of the spirit, then communism will only be a method of distributing goods, but it won't be a revolutionary way of life." So even if the things that you create or the creations that you bear witness to are vapid and frivolous and ridiculous and no one but you ever gets to witness them, I still think that it can have so much value because it can enliven and awaken us to another way of seeing the world, another way of inhabiting the world, as Che Guevara said, a revolutionary way of life. Ultimately, just because we can't immediately see the political function of a song or a piece of writing doesn't render it useless. Social and political transformation can't easily be reduced to one moment or to quantifiable metrics. So I don't think we should underestimate how vital creativity can be in revolutionary movements, how a song can transform consciousness, how the reading of a fiction book can stir us to take action, or how a poem can act as a symbol of revolution. And of course, creativity alone is not enough. We need other actions too. And I also understand that not everyone has the luxury of time or resources to be able to engage with creativity. But if you are able to, I encourage us all to support creatives in the world, implement creativity in our social movements, make time for creative enjoyment, and to follow our creative spirits. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me. I'd really appreciate if you could consider becoming a patron or leaving a one-time donation, as these videos take a lot of time and resources to make, and I'm so grateful for my current patrons for making these videos possible. And thank you to J.C.Finlay for editing, and to Nichole from Pink Spots for being the co-writer of this video. And I hope you all have a beautiful day. Bye.